And so we will record today, and we'll email around a link to that recording for you all to share with your colleagues, and also for folks who are unable to join us for today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the MS4 Community Formula Grant Q&A session. My name is Gianna Petito. I am the CWIP Grants Supervisor, Clean Water Initiative Program Grants Supervisor. Oh, Chris can't hear me. Can other folks hear me? You can hear me.
Gianna.
Okay. Chris, maybe we can work offline with your technical difficulties. Anyone else, feel free to throw that in the chat if you're having similar challenges. My pronouns are she, her, and I am joined today by my colleague, Rachel Wood. So Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gianna. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Wood. I'm the Verification and Maintenance Specialist for the Clean Water Initiative Program, and my pronouns are she and her.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. Rachel's really been leading the charge on working with our business office to get these intent to participate packages out to you all. So thank you so much, Rachel, for your hard work to date. And let's move forward. This is our agenda for today. We've covered quite a bit of this in our February presentation to the MS4 communities, but we'll review some of it, and some stuff has changed. And so we want to highlight some of that for you all in terms of what has changed and what's new since we moved this grant forward through the approval processes. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat along the way, just so you don't forget them, and we can revisit them as well. And again, if you're just joining us, please throw your name and your MS4 community into the chat, so it'll help us track attendance and we know who to follow up with. So today we'll review the statutory context for this program, the purpose of this grant, talk about the budget and award formula, and then dive into some new information around the awarding process, timeline, your scopes of work in these grant agreements, projected grant agreements, and maybe some considerations for participation as you're thinking about this, and wrap up with some next steps and question and answer. Next slide, please. Thanks. So in terms of statutory context, as a reminder, this is the Municipal Stormwater Implementation Grant. This is something that was established through the Clean Water Service Delivery Act, or Act 776 of 2019. So it does now exist in statute. It's 10 VSA 928. The intent of this was to provide grants to municipalities to assist with regulatory stormwater compliance. Specifically, it listed out 3 different permits that municipalities tend to be subject to. So I put little numbers in here to help read it, but it's talking about the Municipal Roads General Permit, the MS4 permit, and then the 3-acre permit. The monies for this is coming through the Clean Water Board budgeting process. So you can learn more about the Clean Water Board at the link I'll be popping in the chat here for you. But essentially, the Clean Water Board reviews their line items, and some of these existing initiatives already supported some of these permit goals. For example, the Agency of Transportation does have 2 different funding programs that support attainment for the Municipal Roads General Permit standards. The Green Schools Initiative already provides some funding to public schools for 3-acre expenses. So really the gap was this MS4 community and sort of a lack of support for you all, which is why we move forward with designing this initiative. Next slide. So the program purpose is to assist regulated MS4 communities with permit compliance. As a regulated MS4 community, you are an eligible grant recipient. Yay, what fun news. But specifically, we're looking at helping the MS4 communities make progress on your phosphorus control plan or integrated water quality plan. So this is what was presented and approved by the Clean Water Board in terms of the intent of the use of these funds. So it's really, that's a primary purpose, is really focusing on those 2 plans. If your community has achieved the targets assigned in these plans, you can secondarily look at some projects within your flow restoration plan and help address some of your flow reduction targets assigned there. Next slide. So it's really a practice-focused program. So program purpose really informs project eligibility of what these funds can be used for. It's not supporting operation and maintenance of stuff. It's not supporting any other MS4 permit requirements like performing IDDE or your communications and outreach, minimum control measures. We have pictures throughout the presentation to give you a sense of what we're talking about, but specifically what's eligible are stormwater practices and road practices, and both funding the design work for that, preliminary or final design, or implementation. If you are new to our program, the Clean Water Initiative program, we're actually very specific in what we mean by a stormwater project or a roads project type, and we define it in this CWIP project types table. And thank you for just sharing the link to that, Rachel. Can you click next to show a snapshot of it? This is, if you go to this link, it's actually an Excel that you would download, and it's a table of all the different project types we fund, and some of them are eligible for the MS4 grant program. So if you see in that second column, if you see MS4 written there, it's eligible. And so this is a snapshot, an example of what we define as a preliminary engineering design for a stormwater project. So there's a definition, there's some references there. So I recommend you familiarize yourself with this project types table. On the other side of the types table are things like standard milestones and deliverables. So if you're using this funding to whichever project type you pick, you'd be expected to proceed with those milestones and submit the deliverables that are listed in this table. You can click again to make that disappear. Thanks, Rachel. Along with being those specific project types, the projects need to meet all the other eligibility screens in our funding policy. We just did a training on project eligibility screening last week, and there's a link to this training being shared in the chat now. It's a lot to go through. It's a lot, particularly for folks who might be new to our process. We are integrating screening as a step within your scope of work. So it's probably helpful for you all, if you're interested in this grant program, to familiarize yourself, watch the training, review the project types table. And if you're signing up and participating, we're actually expecting to sort of help you through the eligibility screening. So if you have your short list of projects that you think are likely to be eligible, we can help you kind of go through the screening process once the grant agreements are signed. And then the last piece for the project to be eligible is that it needs to be currently listed, or you would plan to get it listed in your phosphorus control plan, flow restoration plan, or integrated water quality plan in the case of Burlington. Next slide. How much money are we talking about? This is the full program budget. The Clean Water Board assigned money to it for 2 fiscal years, the state fiscal year 2023, which is just wrapping up, and state fiscal year 2024, which is just about to start. It's a combination of both American Rescue Plan Act dollars and state revenue clean water funds. It totals about $7.5 million. We wanted to simplify the awarding process for you all, so not having you apply. So we designed this as a formula grant. Your intent to participate packages have a lot of information about how the formula is calculated, but sort of basic information is that everyone's eligible for a base award of up to $200,000. And then above that, we apply a formula which integrates both sort of the magnitude of work to be completed and 2 different equity factors. So the tentative award values, the initial ones being sent out to everyone, is in the range of $200,000 to $800,000. Eligible expenses is pretty broad. While we need you to use the money on practices, installation or design of stormwater and roads practices, any expenses related to that are eligible. So you could use the money to hire the engineer, you could use the money for the yellow machines, you can use the money to cover some staff time to oversee the project and move it through administering the grant. So it's a pretty broad suite of eligible expenses, anything related to the scope of work. It's cost reimbursable. From DEC's perspective, that means you need to have an invoice in hand to invoice us. But understanding some municipalities struggle with some cash flow, you don't necessarily need to have paid out that invoice before you get paid by DEC. And 10% is expected to be held for final deliverables. And the last piece that we get a lot of questions on is there is a 50% leverage requirement. Next slide, please. So I did want to take a moment to maybe speak a little bit more to that piece. This is sort of a standard expectation for grant programs that support regulatory projects. It's sort of under the assumption that we want some skin in the game from regulated communities. But what I have here on the slide is a bunch of text specifically from our funding policy, and we'll share a link to it in the chat as well. To give you an overview, we expanded what we would accept as leverage to make this more attainable for communities. So the first bullet is basically just saying that leverage just can't come from our tax revenues or capital dollars at the state level. It could be federal money, it can be local money, and it can't be committed to more than one project. The next bullet is that it can be cash or in kind. So for example, if you're not using the money to cover your staff time, you could count that in kind as towards your leveraging contribution. The third bullet is the one I want to emphasize. It's really sort of new for our updated funding policy and how we tried to really create more opportunities or ways for you to meet the leveraging requirement. We recognize that phosphorus control plans have a lot of projects that can be really expensive and reflect a really large investment from all of you as a community to meet these goals. So we're kind of accepting the whole phosphorus control plan as sort of one project. So within this grant timeframe, which is 3 years from when it's signed now through 2026, if you invest in any other project to help you make progress towards your phosphorus control plan or flow restoration plan, those investments can count as leverage against this project. So I would recommend, again, familiarizing yourself with the funding policy, taking a look, and certainly following up with questions if you have any. But we're hoping that this broader definition really gives more opportunity for folks to be able to meet the leveraging requirement. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Rachel.
Thank you, Gianna. So how are we structuring this grant program? We're not putting this out to competitive bid, as Gianna just mentioned. MS4 communities are all eligible entities, which is why we are doing this formula approach instead. We are envisioning this in a two-step manner, the first being an intent to participate process, and then the second being the executing of the grant agreement and award. So to start, we send you all the intent to participate package that includes an overview of project eligibility, scopes of work, grantee responsibilities, expected milestones and deliverables, a walkthrough of the formula used to determine award offers, and an initial award offer located on the intent to participate signature page. This intent to participate process has some steps and deadlines to be aware of. So I'm going to do a quick high-level overview of the timeline for this process and then do a deeper dive into what we need for both the intent to participate signature page and also the participation worksheet. Here is our target timeline for this intent to participate process. Congratulations, we're on June 27th. We're already on our way for the Q&A session. Our target deadline for sending us the completed intent to participate signature page is July 12th. We have heard from some of you that an extension is needed in order to participate, and we can work with you to find the right deadline extension. We want to make this as accessible as possible and work with you to meet these targets, but just a heads up that these extensions may delay the timeline and process by a couple weeks, as we need to hear from everyone about their intention to participate to receive the final participation list and official signed decision before we can move to the next step. Updated award values are based on the participation redistribution and will be provided when we send the participation worksheet around July 19th timeframe. MS4s will then have 2 weeks to fill out this participation worksheet and return to DEC. DEC will then review the estimates and potentially reach back out with counter proposals if necessary around early August timeframe, around August 2nd to the 4th, and then hopefully wrapping this all up and confirming participation terms around August 11th. So here we have our intent to participate signature page. Starting this with our process will help us finalize this list of participating entities, and we do need to hear from everyone before we can move on to the next step in our process. The reason for this is because this is a formula-based grant program that distributes funds based on who is participating. So we're requesting responses by July 12th, but as I just said, if you need more time, please work with us. We're happy to make it accessible for all. If we have not heard from an MS4 community at all by the deadline listed above, we will assume your MS4 community has opted out. and funds earmarked for your community may be redistributed elsewhere. So it's best to reach out with questions and concerns ahead of time. More communication is best. So after we've heard from everyone on their intent to participate and received completed signature pages, DEC will then send this participation worksheet that includes an updated award value based on participation. In the intent to participation package that we sent out a couple weeks ago, we did include a sample version of this worksheet. That's not the version you will fill out. We will be sending you a version for you to fill out. This is only meant to be as a reference. Once you receive the worksheet from us with your updated, once you have received the worksheet from us, we'll expect you to put in an estimate of performance measures based on the award value. On the right, here's a list of performance measures. Items A and B are mandatory for all reporting, regardless of the project type. Items C through D are standard performance measures expected to be reported based on a project type. Another version of this table is also available in your intent to participate package that also lists performance measure by project type for your reference. At a minimum, grantees must report at least 3 performance measures. That's the 2 mandatory plus 1 other. Also on this worksheet is a space to provide an updated budget request if less than the updated award value. And note that your budget can also cover personnel time needed to manage the award and doesn't solely need to be subcontracted costs and expenses. The current timeline is to submit completed participation worksheets to us, DEC, by August 2nd. DEC will then review the estimates provided based on the award value and compare for reasonableness and return the worksheet with a counter proposal if necessary. And that'll be located in the DEC counter proposal column on the far right of the table. Once we have reached consensus and confirmed participation terms, we can move forward with step 2 of the process, executing the grant agreements. Step 2 is a little up in the air at the moment because it's very dependent on the completion of step 1. So it's a little ambiguous timeline-wise at the current moment. But our current projected estimate is to have final grant agreements sent out by late August, early September timeframe. You'll have 90 days to sign the grant agreement. And since this grant is partially funded with American Rescue Plan Act funds, ARPA funds, which is federal, all agreements have the same end date of September 30th, 2026, with no option to extend the deadline. So what are your expected scope of work? Much of this has remained the same, so I'll go over it pretty quickly. First is grant execution, sign the final agreement within 90 days of receipt. Then you're expected to walk through the project eligibility screening and selection, and we are happy to support you as needed during this process. It's expected to submit this project eligibility screening with identified list of permits needed to the technical project manager from DEC. We need that information for permitting requirements. And we also are asking that you submit proposed project information into our watershed projects database, which is a step in the project eligibility screening, which is included. We next will launch the projects and update watershed project database. And complete the standard milestones and deliverables per the project type as outlined in our funding policy and the Appendix B project types table. There will be quarterly check-ins with the DEC technical project manager on progress, and also what's highlighted here is a little new from what we recently presented to you back in February. Is the state fiscal recovery quarterly progress reporting tracking. This is because this is funded by ARPA. We have quarterly progress report tracking requirements, and this will be submitted through an online form. Then you'll do final reporting and deliverables, closing out our projects in watershed projects database, submitting final deliverables and invoices. And then closing out of the project. This agreement is to end September 30th, 2026. As I said before, no extension available. It's a hard deadline. So now I recognize we just went through a ton of information, steps, and what MS4s need to do in order to participate. So here we've listed some items for you to consider or pay close attention to, as they may be tricky or present some challenges when participating in this grant. These are also items that might be points of discussion to bring up with your select boards or other decision-making bodies in your towns. The first being, make sure the period of performance for this award is able to be met and you are able to meet the leverage requirements that Gianna just presented on. Look closely at what is expected within the scope of work, milestones, and deliverables, and determine if you may have capacity challenges in meeting these requirements and responsibilities. Funding policy has a lot of information, including expectations for all CWIP grant recipients. Good to take a deep dive into that. Attachment C of the grant agreement, available for your preview on page 17 of your intent to participate package, has some standard state provisions for all contracts and grants. And then finally, the federal ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act grant terms and conditions are listed out in attachments D through G, and lay out all federal terms and conditions that are important pieces for your review and consideration. Now, these aren't the only things to consider. It's not an all-inclusive list, but we just wanted to direct your attention to some pieces and highlight these important bits. Now we have some additional resources that are available for you guys, including some trainings. So the first is the CWIP applicant and recipients resources webpage, which is a home to majority of these pieces of information, including the PDF version of the CWIP 2023 funding policy, the Appendix A CWIP project eligibility screening fillable PDF, and Appendix B list of all CWIP project types in an Excel spreadsheet form. Back in February, we joined an MS4 meeting and introduced this formula grant program, and you can review the recording. An overview of the CWIP funding policy was completed and identified key changes made in the most recent version, and you can review a recording of that training. A training on Vermont Division for Historic Preservation Review for Clean Water Project is good information to know for project eligibility screening and provides some key information on how to do this. And a very recent new training that Gianna just presented on is completing the Clean Water Project eligibility screening form. And the recording is also available for your review as well. And we'll share these links and resources in a follow-up email after this session that includes the recording of today's event as well. So don't feel like you have to scramble to get all of these links down. So what is the future state of this program? It is currently funded largely with the short-term federal funds. It's really unknown the future condition of funding availability as a whole, not just for the MS4 grant program, but the municipal stormwater implementation grant as well. In the clean water budget, it's a tier 2 priority, and it's not the top priority for the Clean Water Board. So as the whole budget contracts and federal funds start to go away, we're starting to talk internally about how we can continue to support MS4's long-term. We don't have final answers yet, but may in the future be some combination of loan forgiveness. For now, the MS4 Community Formula Grant is a one-time grant for 3 years of predictability, and we'll get back to you on the future state of things. So, in summary, we threw a lot of information at you. So the next steps for the intent to participate process are review the intent to participate package, sign and submit your intent to participate signature by July 12th, and then complete the participation worksheet that we send you with the updated award values. Current next steps, start your preliminary review of project eligibility if applicable. Reach out to us with any questions about that as well. Review resources and trainings and materials. Also ask us questions about that. Just active engagement with us during this process because more communication is best and we want to make sure that this is accessible to people. Some of you may already have been contacted by our DEC grants management specialist, Renee Miller. She works with our financial office. She's reaching out to do pre-award eligibility and insurance checks, which are requirements to take part in this grant. So just a heads up, you may be contacted by her. And with that, I will open it up to question and answer. We did receive some written questions ahead of time, so thank you all who did that. And we'll be compiling and circulating these answers to these questions after the event as well.
Thanks, Rachel. Do you want to start with the written questions since they were sent in advance, and then we can check the chat and open it up?
Sounds good. I can read it off. One question that was sent ahead of time is whether a project can be eligible for funding if there is no need for extra phosphorus control, i.e. the MS4 has already met their phosphorus reduction requirements.
Great. Yeah, so I hope this presentation answered that question and that the emphasis is the phosphorus reduction requirements in the phosphorus control plans, but if those have been achieved, if you have any other associated flow restoration plan targets, you can use the funds to do a stormwater or roads project to help address those as well.
Next, we have a question of page 3 indicates this is one of potentially 15 agreements to provide funding to MS4 communities. Can you provide clarification on this? Will there be 15 grant opportunities, and how will all of this work?
Great, thanks. Do you want to take it, Rachel, or do you?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is one grant agreement to each MS4 community, which there are 15 of you in this eligible entities, not 15 grant opportunities.
Okay, thanks, Rachel.
Question about if they can get a list of all the MS4 communities reduction targets to see how everyone fits in with complying with MS4 permit requirements. I think we can send those. Those are pretty publicly known. Is the money going to be available every year? Since we need to complete our projects by 2036, an annual influx of funding is going to be needed in order to attain this goal.
Yeah, so I hope that last slide sort of addressed that too. What Rachel was bringing up is that this was funded with an influx of federal dollars through the Clean Water Board, but the Clean Water Board budgeting process is not the only mechanism by which funding may be available for the MS4 communities. And so I think that there are folks who are exploring support through the Lake Champlain Basin program. We're internally chatting about support through the Water Infrastructure Financing Program and some loan forgiveness there. So there's not sort of a clear home for this after this initial formula grant opportunity. So we certainly encourage you to participate if you have the capacity to, and we want to help provide that capacity where possible, as you know, providing you with a liaison, DEC liaison, or technical project manager. But this is not really guaranteed to repeat after this year.
We have a question in the chat from Dan. Just to be clear, is there a DEC gatekeeper that has to approve each project before an MS4 incurs costs on a project? There's a lot of questions. I'll just start with that one.
Yeah, sure. So, Dan, this is a step. This is an expected part of the scope of work is to review the projects for eligibility. And part of the expectations for all grant recipients is that they are following the funding policy and meeting those expectations. So this is a cost reimbursable grant contingent on satisfactory performance. There is not a time at which the technical project manager is reviewing and approving the screening forms and saying, yep, that works, or no, that doesn't work, where we want to be available. We think this is a new process for really every one of our grants and all of our grant programs. And so that's probably going to be really helpful if you engage with the technical project manager. If towns choose to proceed at their own risk, they may not receive funding back if they're not following their expectations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's good that you're allowing the flexibility. It's just different from a usual thing where the grant gets approved, and as long as the grant gets approved, you feel pretty safe incurring costs. In this case, yeah, the towns will want to check and.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's why we want to be sort of the assistance. Our technical project manager is going to be the person that if you are concerned, if you need assistance going through it, we'll go through it with you and we can confirm that it's correct, but we don't have to be a gatekeeper. That's how it's designed. This was also intentional for kind of just minimizing administrative burden. So there was some suggestion that we had everyone propose the projects up front, but we were worried over a 3-year time period with towns wanting to be opportunistic. We'd wanted you to not actually write into your grant agreement what the project was, just what your projected phosphorus would be. So if you needed to change the project, you would go through the eligibility screening form, make sure your new project would still be eligible. And if you did have enough sufficient funds, like switch gears. And that was the intention of not actually documenting a specific project in your grant agreements. Side note, if you are thinking of spending all your funding on design, Rachel did list all the expected performance measures, and one of them is phosphorus reduction. It's okay if that's 0, if you're just doing design work and you're not going to actually get anything implemented on the ground, that's fine. We just need to document that you're planning on doing design work, that 0 will be your performance measure, and that your budget is appropriate based on the scope of work you're proposing. I think James has another question.
Yes. If a project is listed on the Clean Water Project with a WPD ID, which is Watershed Projects Database, does that make a project eligible, or does it need to be specifically listed on the flow restoration plan integrative? Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, James, both. So the Watershed Project Database ID is one of 8 eligibilities that the project needs to meet in the funding policy. So please watch that training that we did last week with that link. In addition to that, for this specific program, it needs to be listed, or you need to plan to get it listed and work with a stormwater program to get it listed in your plans. We've heard from the stormwater program that these plans are sometimes flexible and you're being opportunistic, so it doesn't have to already be proposed in your PDF from 5 years ago, but we need it to be part of what your plan is to meet your target. Sure.
That was the last question in the chat that I saw, so we can open it up to raised hands, or people can continue to add questions to the chat.
Hey, this is Chip in St. Albans City.
Hi, Chip.
Hey, thanks for the presentation today. And I'm sorry if I missed this, but September comes in before a construction season is really over. Is there really no way to extend the September 2026 deadline?
Yeah, so there isn't really, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. There isn't a way to extend this. It's a ARPA deadline. It's a requirement for DEC to report this up the chain. So that is the hard deadline for this agreement because of ARPA.
Okay, thanks.
The ARPA funding performance period ends at the end of that calendar year, and the administration needs this last quarter to wrap that all up. And so it's really a kind of use it or lose it situation with that federal funding. Thanks, Chip.
Thanks, Emily.
Another thing maybe to note, we shared some links of other trainings. If you're reviewing the project types table for what is a stormwater project milestone, what are all the milestones we'd have to do? We mentioned this in February, but what's new this year is a requirement to potentially go through Vermont Division of Historic Preservation review of your project. So that's really something to become more familiar with. So certainly watch that training we provided on March 8th. Read that section of our funding policy. This is the reason we're giving this presentation, is we want to make this funding available to you all, but we also want to be really transparent about there's a lot of steps and a lot of process involved in terms of using these clean water funds. So that's why Rachel was saying considerations for participation, to really review those milestones and deliverables and make sure you have the capacity to implement them. And again, we're available to answer questions as needed along the way. Any other questions from folks? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Before you hop off, if you didn't already put your name and the town you're representing into the chat, please do so to help us track attendance so we know which folks maybe we need to follow up with. We will email around a link to this recording so you can share it with your colleagues or a select board member or however you need to share this information. Again, please get back to us by July 12th with an intent to participate signature page, or let us know as soon as possible if that deadline is going to be hard for you to meet and what your new proposed deadline would be. And otherwise, thank you so much for your time today, and really appreciate your hopeful participation. We hope to work with you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
Bye,
good
thank
day.
you.